Derek Hagen, the extremely warm welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me, and I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, can't wait, Derek. We are we're kind of brothers from another mother, from opposite sides of other ends of the pond, because we communicate in a way that is I think really cool, and that's via sketching, visual communication around the topic of money. We have known each other for a while on social media, and I think followed each other, and then were very fortunate to meet up and spend a really good amount of time with a conference called Shift in Orlando about a month ago now. And I thought, I've got to get Derek for a conversation on the podcast. I think this is going to be really cool. So I can't wait to dig into to your brain and to your work, and really kind of think about how what you do applies to a modern retirement.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited for this chat.
So Derek, I'm really interested about your journey and how you've got to where you've got to, right? Because I think it's really important to set that foundation, because the way that you communicate really important emotional around money, I think is so amazing, and the way that you sketch them out and the way that you communicate them. Your business is called Meaningful Money, and the strap line on your website, I think, is just vital to understand. Your work is about transforming people's relationship with money, enabling them to live a meaningful life, connect with their values, and discover their purpose. Three things that I think are so meaningful to living a fulfilling retirement. I'm really interested to figure out from you and hear from you why that is important to you, and how you've kind of dedicated your career and your work and ended up where you are, doing the work you're doing, and kind of communicating it in a way that you do.
Yeah, so my background, and feel free to pull me down, ask more detail anywhere along the line, so I'll keep it medium to high here.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the what I call exterior finance. We're talking about the mechanics of money, nuts and bolts. Got this designation called Chartered Financial Analyst, CFA designation, really deep into investments and math and equations and all this kind of stuff. And then from there, I got a certified financial planner, exterior nuts and bolts of money, kind of more than just investing. And it started to feel like life, or money anyways, was a math problem. There's all the tools that I have here. I know how to solve for this. I know how to optimize for that. I know how to spot if there's an error in the software, because I know how the mechanics behind it work. So all I need to know is the inputs, and I can give you the outputs. That felt like that's how that should work. Except you start to see people, clients or otherwise, who they're either not doing it, or they're not doing things that make sense through the lens of this equation-filled filter that I was using on the world. And then 2017, I headed out to Nashville, Tennessee in the United States, and I had a seminar with a guy named Ted Klotz. It was an exquisite listening seminar, which it's a whole weekend on how to listen, but I promise you it's more than just shut up and open your ears. It was a whole weekend on evolutionary psychology and biology and neuroscience and psychology and philosophy. Basically, how does this brain of ours, how does this mind of ours take in information, including advice? And so that weekend changed me in the sense that I thought, okay, well, there's way more to all of this than nuts and bolts, the mechanics of money. So I set on this path of what I now call interior side of money, or interior finance, which is our relationship with money. So that worked out well, because I've always had this fascination with the big questions and what does it mean to live a good life. And I thought about these philosophical questions when I was a kid. So here was this chance for me to kind of take my natural curiosity about what is life? What does that even mean? And what does a good life mean? What does a meaningful life mean? And mix it up with people who think they are doing the right thing. I found some success. I retired early. I did whatever the boxes that people told me to check. But is that it? I had fun for a couple of years, and I'm sure you know these people. I retired, and it was great for a couple of years. I got all my projects done, and now I'm bored out of my mind. I'm so sick of golfing. I'm so sick of having no structure to my day. What else is there to do? Or people who are afraid to retire because I don't know what's on the other side of that. All I've been doing is this. So that's kind of the the high level version of how I came to be doing this. And across the way, I found some training with several people kind of concurrently. Carl Richards is a person in our industry who's been on your show. He is a visual guy. I was introduced to a guy named Dan Rome. He's kind of like the Ray and Poobah of visual communicators. And then I just found myself drawn to other people who draw, like yourself. Wonderful blog named Wait But Why by Tim Urban. Just a bunch of stick figures where he explores life's big questions through, I call them bad drawings. I don't mean bad as a negative judgment, but it looked like they were drawn by fourth graders, right? But yet it takes his topics and they hit home when you see this little stick figure. And so I took all that and I incorporated it, and I'm drawn for my whole life. Not stick figures and pie charts, but I hate to use the word artist, but I would draw a lot as a kid. So now there was another opportunity for me to take that passion or interest at least, and see if I could take this kind of esoteric philosophy, meaningful living, relationship with money stuff, and put it in a picture so that my grandma can understand what we're talking about.
I think it's such an interesting journey. I want to pick on something before we get into the more meat of the questions that I know I want to discuss with you. But what's really interesting for me is that the starting point for you is a CFA. I mean, you're deep diving into spreadsheets that people would get very scared of, right? You're deep diving into big numbers. You're deep diving into big equations, as you said, and it's really interesting when you've gone down that road. But actually, when the work or the journey that you've been on has made you go, well, actually, this thing needs to be simplified down to its essence, and in order to actually get the message out to the wider public, the message actually needs to be simplified down to one page kind of drawings, right? One page. It's really interesting for me that that journey has been, I'll do the spreadsheet thing and I'll do the numbers thing because that's where the message needs to go. And actually me and that journey is, the message hits harder when you do a one-page circle with a message in it, or a stick figure doing a certain thing. And it's really important for people to understand money's a very, very complicated and complex thing. And if we can get those receive those and give those messages in a much more simplified way, I think it helps so many more people, because people are scared of spreadsheets, but they can relate to visual drawings. I think that's kind of how I see it. It's a really interesting journey, right?
Yeah, that's well said. Nothing takes away from the fact that there are still people doing those things behind the scenes, but your common person, 80% or more of the world, doesn't need to know about the actuaries doing the crunching the numbers, or the options trader making the trades. We don't need to care about that. I need to care, how does that matter to me and what I'm going to do today and next year and 5 years from now. I don't care anything about how it happens. I just want to care that it happens.
So one of your, I think, overarching philosophies, you said it to me when we were in Orlando, and it's on your website, and you've written and drawn about this, but kind of, money is a tool, not a goal, which I think is a crucial statement for a lot of people to understand. How do you believe, or how can that statement and philosophy apply to a modern day retirement, people thinking about retirement? Because I think it applies massively to people that are planning this crucial phase of life.
I think sometimes it might be helpful. Tool and goal is one way to view this. Means and ends are another way.
Brilliant.
So when I'm thinking about a goal, I'm thinking about a particular outcome and end. And it is very common, unless you've done any interior work or searched inside and done some introspection, it's easy to look around and see what other people do. What am I supposed to do with this money? I'm supposed to do what the proverbial Joneses are. So I work a particular job so that I can make a particular income and live in this particular area. And then I want to retire at this particular age with this dollar amount. That's my magic number. My point in this statement is that that's not true, because all of those are using money as a goal. As soon as I get $3 million or 3 million pounds, that's when I'll be able to retire. Or as soon as I make $75,000 a year, that's from the portfolio. That's when I can finally do it. Or hurry up and retire at 40. That's what I want to do, is hurry up and be one of these FIRE people, retire early, financially independent people. Except why? Why 3 million? What are you going to do with 75,000? And if you retire at 40, what are you going to do with the other 45 years of your life? If you're just on a desert island, having a stack of cash doesn't help you. So money can't be an end. It can only be a means. But our default mode seems to be, as humans, is to treat it as an end. I certainly was there at one point. I had to hurry up and I want 6 figures as my salary. That's a big, important goal for me. Why? What is it? And if you really are honest with yourself, it's probably some version of status. Other people, it might be because that's what I'm supposed to do. Simply thinking about it's a tool gives us the permission to step back and say, a tool for what? Bingo. Exactly. A tool for what? And that tool for what is going to be different for every person. And it's a tool to live a meaningful life. But I can't define what that is for you. Only you can define that for yourself. But that's a realm where that's a topic that a lot of people don't usually think about. So that's where I'm trying to think now. When I say it's a tool, that doesn't mean we can ignore it. It's an important tool. We need to know how to tend it. We need to know how to care for it. We can hire advisors to help us understand and make sure we're doing the right things with it. It's an important tool, but it is only a tool. There's no saying that he who dies with the most money dies. So what's the point of having it all?
Exactly. Yeah. I'd love to get your opinion on this. I mean, I have a problem with goals anyway, right? And I have a problem with human beings setting goals because, as you've quite rightly said, I think, the goal is not the thing, right? Humans are wired to move forwards. We get to $75,000, $1 million, like we're not satisfied. That might be a goal that we've set ourselves, but it doesn't mean you stop there because then we go again and then we go again. And it's until you find the meaning behind the thing, goals are hugely challenging for people. I think there's a study over in the States, and something happens similar over here when they go to people. The answer to the question how much is enough is double what I've got. It doesn't really matter what you've got, right? You've got £1 million. The answer's 2. You got 10. The answer's 20, because we're actually pretty rubbish at kind of articulating our goals. What human beings love, I believe, is the journey. And so I think if we realize that money is a tool to enable a journey, and that journey is by its sheer nature, because it's in the future, is unpredictable, goals change. I mean, I've had several conversations with clients before where they'll come in with a real specific set of goals. It's kind of like, and I'm kind of, it's real life, but making the numbers up effectively, but retire at 65 with £1 million in the pension fund to take 100 grand a year out for the first 10 years. And I said, well, why 65? So, that's when, my friends retired. Why $1 million? Oh, it's because I've read in the papers that that's what I need. It's like, well, that's not a goal, is it? What if I tell you could retire at 61 with 800,000? Would you do that? Oh, yeah, of course. Well, it's not 65 and $1 million, because that's not a goal then. People don't know what's possible. If we see money as a tool and get that foundational work in, I think it's hugely important.
Well, so
just on that, how do you... So forget the goal thing, right? I think it's important to set a direction of travel for anyone that's listening, right? It's really important to understand that there needs to be some aspirations about what you want to do going forward. But I think Carl Richards says this very well, they're kind of loosely held aspirations, right? It's kind of like have a sense of direction, know where you're going. But if we think of money as a tool, what do you think money is best used for in retirement then?
So in general speaking, this is going to be whatever speaks to the person. So it's going to be best used on what's going to bring you, whoever's listening to this, the most meaning. And meaning, so let's take a step back and define what meaning is. So the person I learned this from, Michael Steger, is a positive psychology researcher, and more specifically, is a meaning of life researcher. So his model for meaningful living is a 3-part model. And one of those is purpose. Often people will use these terms interchangeably, meaning and purpose. And I'm using his words. He says it's redundant. It's like saying the autumn leaves are beautiful in Minnesota and the United States. You don't need to say both of those.
Yeah.
Because purpose is one of the 3 components of meaningful living. The three components is purpose. This is something interesting to do with your time, something that matters to do with your time. This is kind of a motivational component, behavioral component. What are you going to do with your life? And then there's a sense of significance, which is the feeling that life matters. So kind of, this is your personal values. Are you living in line with your values? So both of those kind of are does life matter? Does it matter now? And do I have something to do with my time that matters? And then there's a making sense. Does life make sense? So it's a sense of coherence. So I can't define people's sources of meaning. A source of meaning is activities that we do that give us a sense of meaning in one or more of these categories. Often, social connection is at the core of a lot of this. That helps us feel significant. It gives us something to do with our time. It makes sense. Social relatedness is a common way people find meaning, and yet many people will become workaholics because they think they're going to support their family, say by bringing in a bunch of money and working a lot. But they're missing a life. They're missing the actual social component of that. So the meaning ought to be diversified. This is kind of making this sound like it's an investment. We see way too often, I think, people have a undiversified source of meaning. That means I feel like I have a meaningful life, but it comes from one source. Say work. Say I'm an attorney, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a friend of mine. I just had a happy hour with him a couple of weeks ago. He's a fixed income trader, and that's who they are. They find it feels fine. I like this life, but now retirement's coming, and the fixed income trader guy says, who am I if I'm not a trader? The doctor says, I used to be a doctor, and now I don't know what to do. And we have, in my state, we have the Mayo Clinic, which is a pretty big hospital. There's so many doctors who retire and then they come back. It's like emeritus status. They just want to hang out because they have nothing else to do with their time. Because their sole source of meaning was wrapped up in work. They didn't have any leisure. They didn't have any friends, or if they did, it was minor. But having multiple sources of meaning can help when you lose one. That could be a good thing, like retiring. But just like risk management, sometimes we lose a source of meaning, the ability to experience meaning for some bad reasons. Now, if my sole source of meaning is raising kids, or family, say, and something happens to my family, I've lost my whole entire source of meaning. Not to always be a downer, because that could be good too. The kids can empty nest, like they can leave the nest, and then now here I am stuck with, well, now I'm not a dad anymore, so what am I supposed to do? So how can we use money as a tool? Find different sources of meaning across different areas of your life so that when inevitably one goes away because the kids leave or because you retire, there are other sources of meaning that can take its place.
Such great advice. I think that's like purpose, significance, and makes sense, right? They're the three things that kind of wrap into meaning. And I love that kind of, the diversification of meaning. I've said, and I've drawn something on this as well. You would probably expect that, because every time you post a drawing on social media, I'm like, I've done one of them before. Like it feels like we've got the same ideas. But
Right.
this, I've got one that kind of says portfolio diversification, like US stocks, UK stocks, and people focus on that diversification. But what they need to actually focus on is life diversification. And it comes back to what you've said, right? I think, and it goes across many different aspects. Some of the most energized retirements that I see from my clients are people that have got diversification of their social networks across different age groups and things like that, right? It's kind of, I think what you don't want to do is have all of your purpose, significance, and I'm going to make this up, with a load of people at a golf club who are all older than you. They're all in their 70s, because they might go before you go. And as that starts dispersing, you've got to quickly find other sources. So I think, the ability for money to diversify purpose, significance, what makes sense, create different social connections, networks, but also have it in flow, I think is really important. I don't know whether you kind of agree with that. That kind of understanding that meaning can change and will change over time, and you have to be kind of open to be flexible about reviewing this throughout your retirement, which I think is really important. Kind of in your in your opinion, as you've seen people or think about people entering this phase and thinking about how they do meaning, and this is a loaded question, by the way, do you think people put enough energy and time and planning into this before they retire?
I don't see it. From what I see is...
Thank God for that. I thought you were going to say yes, and I was like, that's that, and that's
Yeah, so it feels like, and I know you've drawn about this, talked about this, written about this before. There's a common belief system, I suppose, or I don't know, schema, script that runs that says, I can hurry up and retire, and then I can start living life. I just need to hurry up and retire, and then that's the finish line. And that's in your drive.
Well, that solves all the problems, right? Retirement solves all the problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Now I don't have any more problems anymore. And then, so because expectations matter, if I expect no problems, I'm going to be extremely frustrated and full of negative emotions when life happens, because there's always going to be problems to solve. We wouldn't even want a life without problems. Because if you think about the best stories, nobody reads the book about the person who sits around and does nothing all day with nothing to do and no problems to solve. It's boring. And so with life, because if everything was going well, we would just become hypersensitive to the smallest thing not going well, right? So the human condition says there's going to be problems. So it's not about eliminating problems. It's about getting better at dealing with problems. It's not about getting rid of the bad. It's about getting better at feeling bad. So that's my expectation, is that, okay, now I'm retired. Now there's no more problems to solve. And then I'm bored. Or then I've never spent this much time with my spouse before. And don't know how we're going to not tear each other's heads off. Or I feel directionless. I'm nothing else to do. I feel meaninglessness or whatever. Those are big problems, but it could be small problems too. Like, I've got no structure to my day. So what am I going to do? Nothing. And then pretty soon I start to feel self-conscious about, God, I'm kind of lazy. I don't do anything. And the self-nature critic gets to me. And so, yeah, viewing it as a finish line is, well, can be problematic. And I think usually it's problematic.
I think it's absolutely the reason why people don't plan, right? Because again, we've just kind of squashed the whole goal theory a little bit, but people have that as a goal, don't they? It's kind of like retirement is a goal in itself, and I'm heading towards it, and all I'm focused on is what I'm retiring from. That's kind of like the retirement thing. It's a finish line I'm retiring from, and I get that there's many people that want to retire from something because they're unhappy or they're physically unable to do the manual work that they might have done previously. Or actually what's really interesting or what's horrible for people is when this is sprung on them, right? It's kind of a forced retirement. It's kind of, you've been made redundant. Your company's not, it's kind of gone into liquidation or kind of whatever. That can be difficult emotionally and psychologically for people to deal with. But I do agree. I think it's that, people don't do the planning work for what's beyond retirement because retirement is the thing itself. And I heard something the other day or a couple of weeks ago that, people often spend more time planning a 2-week holiday or vacation than they do actually a 30-year retirement, right? This is big stakes stuff that needs time and planning and a good couple of years of kind of lead-in and runway, I think, to deal with all the emotional baggage that you will carry kind of going into this phase of life. Is that something that you kind of see and agree with?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think when people have this idea of, like 6 thoughts going on, but when I have feels, if I don't plan, then I can keep this grand vision of some vague version of what retirement means. And I kind of like that because that's not what this is. And so there's this thing that I can think about over here. And the minute I start planning for that, now it becomes real. And then I might start to see, well, that's not going to actually be that much different from how it is now, except now I don't have anything to do with my time. So there's a interesting, this just came in my head. There's my friend, Amy Mullen, who runs Money Quotient, showed me this, a sketch. She drew me a sketch, which is interesting because I'm usually the one sketching. She had 2 circles, and one circle is called order, and the other circle is called chaos. And I'm actually drawing it right here. I apologize to the people who are only listening. When people are working, they're only in the order circle.
Yeah.
It's too much order, especially if you're at a big corporation. It's bureaucracy and everything. You have to be at work at this time and there's meetings at that time and everything's just orderly, orderly, orderly. And so, of course, we don't want that. I don't like working because I don't like this order. So then we retire and we do a pendulum swing all the way to the other side, which is unstructured time, chaos. So then it doesn't take long before I bored or feel meaninglessness or something, because unstructured free time isn't that great for us. So what's helpful is to have that plan where we're going to pop in the middle here. And whatever that means, sometimes it's volunteering, sometimes it's mentoring, sometimes it's helping out with the grandkids, but having some kind of structure to your life is helpful. But again, that planning takes away from this vague idea of retirement, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we start to think about bringing a sense of reality and realism to retirement. I think a lot of people will kind of live in a vision that's maybe a little bit dreamy. And actually, when they start to get into the nuts and bolts of, and that's cool, I want people to dream, right? We absolutely need to kind of dream what it looks like. But when we get into the nuts and bolts of thinking about this stuff, I think it often brings a sense of, that reality check in. And I think unless you can work with someone that can bring this out of you, or you can naturally bring this out of you, you end up reverting back to the mean, don't you? I think you end up going, well, we'll just make this kind of, as long as it's as good as what it was while I was working, or it's a slightly better version of it. So I think you need people to help you or force you into continuing in that mindset of making sure we don't actually bake it back into an average or reality, because that's when retirement's come into problem. People go, well, if that's going to be like that, then I'll just go back to work, right? I'll just do that. So I think that can be quite challenging, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with habits. If we get into our habits, we get into what we're familiar with. And this is a pretty big retirement, pretty big life transition. So most of us don't have a lot of practice with big transitions. Everybody has some transitions, and some are bigger than others, of course, but this is one that most people will eventually experience. And you can't be good without practice, but we don't really get a lot of practice transitioning to different areas of work, life. I don't want to say balance, but the work and life, whatever that means.
Yeah.
It's tough to navigate those sometimes. Yeah.
I've been having this conversation a lot actually about that. I think it's a really interesting topic just to quickly talk about, because there is, like, in reality, I think most people want to kind of retire once and retire well. I'm not sure they want to do, loads of, although, things change and people, but in sense of what retirement means, I think they want to retire once and retire well and not feel like they have to keep going back and forward and back and forwards. And I think most people have the ability to retire once and retire well. It just will take a little bit of work to do that. But also there is very little, there's no mentors in that sense. There's no one to look up to. There is no framework, I think, out there about what this modern day retirement is. The retirement that I think the 50 to 60-year-olds have witnessed in their parents and their grandparents is and was materially different to the retirement that they're entering into. So there is no playbook for this. They can't even look at it and go, well, actually, there's a bunch of people that I think have retired well or retired badly. And I think that causes some of its own issues. We're going at it really blind and inexperienced, full of trepidation and fear, and no one has an answer. I think people are looking for certainty and looking for an answer when at a stage of life that, as you quite rightly said, around purpose and significance and the meaningful, making money at all to have a meaningful life means that you can actually navigate the ebbs and flows of life if you have that attitude. And I think that's really, really important to understand.
Yeah, I like that idea of retiring poorly and well. And I think too, there can be a fear of judgment too. Like if I retire and then I have to go back to work, whether it's because I'm bored, say, what are the Joneses? What are the neighbors going to think of me, or my friends, or social media? Are they going to think, boy, he retired too early, he doesn't have enough money to do it, or what kind of judgments are going to come my way if I go back to work? bad and the fear of judgment is strong. So that might have some motivation or, contribute to some of our motivations. So that can be interesting to, if you're helping people with retirement or if you're coming close to retirement yourself, is to just simply ask the question, do I know people who have, in my opinion, retired poorly? What was it about that I think they retired poorly? I know somebody who retired too early, now they're bored, for example, or something like that. At the same time, do I know people who have retired, what I would call they retired well? And what was it about that as well? And then from that, I can use information. I can use that as data to help think through my own retirement. So you could do this in a way that you can use your own observations and try to avoid what the people who, in your opinion, retired poorly. We can try to avoid some of that, and we can try to do more of the people who we've seen retire well.
Yeah, I've got an exercise that I take people through in our kind of retirement workbook. It's exactly that. It's called My Retirement Observations. It's kind of, there's a list of things of what you've observed from people that have retired poorly, and there's a list of things that you've observed from people that have retired well. And I think it's really important to try and find those people. Like, you Google them. There's plenty of people actually sharing their retirement stories personally, the public, and being upfront about it. There's, if you work with a retirement planner or financial planner, that there's often a community of people to kind of tap into around how they've done things. And I think I would definitely ask, if you're working with a financial planner, ask your financial planner to go, can you put me in touch with 3 or 4 people to get their opinion on things as we do this, and think about what's gone well and what's not. As much as, again, I go back to the goal thing. I'm not a fan of goals, but I love what we call anti-goals, right? It's kind of like, what have you, that kind of, what don't you want to happen? Forget what you do want to happen, because I think that's a really challenging question. But when I ask people, what don't you want to happen? Often there's a lot of things that they've observed that they don't want to happen. And I think it's really important to get those out as well. That is part of your ongoing retirement journey in terms of figuring out what you don't want to happen. Because if you see yourself going down that road, then at least you've got statements and in terms of like words that you've said to people that people can hold that accountable to. And that comes back into purpose and significance and meaning, right? If you don't want these things to happen to you, you need to get that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to keep on the purpose thing, because you asked, I don't know where I saw it, but I saw it somewhere. You put a very, very short tweet or LinkedIn post out with a question on it, and that question was, or getting someone to answer, kind of, money's purpose in my life is to. I think that's one of the most powerful questions or kind of exercises that I've really come across, right? We've talked about the purpose and and significance and everything, but why do you think and we've touched, but why do you think it's so crucial to answer that question? Because it is such an amazing question for someone to write down. Go get a pen and paper now, write it down, and figure out answering it. And I think my view is that it's not one answer, right? There could be some multiples in this. Is to X, Y, Z type thing. But what a powerful question.
It hits on something that I've called financial purpose, but it's answering the question: if I'm going to view money as a tool, what am I going to use this tool for? Generally speaking, and so it's helpful to do some kind of introspective work in terms of what is important to me and what do I want to prioritize, because that's what my money, and not just my money, all my resources, my time, my energy, all that. What should I prioritize? Because we're often bad at this. Humans in general, we're often bad at prioritizing because we're doing so much of what we think we're supposed to do. And I think one of my insights into insight is used loosely here, into people reprioritizing their lives, is there was a television program some time ago now. It was called I Shouldn't Be Alive, and it was about people who had crazy experiences. Attacked by an alligator, fell off of a boulder, stranded in the jungle. Right? So they should have died, but they didn't. And one common theme is they all come out of this with a new appreciation for, holy cow, I've been living wrong. It's similar to the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, that Ronnie Ware wrote. She was an end-of-life nurse, and she wrote this. She noticed in her talking to people who were on their deathbeds, most people regretted some aspect of their life, and it kind of fell into 5 categories with a lot of overlap. But her point of writing what started as a blog post that went completely viral, she turned that into a book. The first thing you might think is, why is a blog post about other people's regrets on their deathbed, why is that so viral? Why are people so interested in that? Well, it's probably because, well, what am I? What do I have any of those? I don't feel like I'm off necessarily always living a meaningful life. So what happens if I can look at regrets and then reprioritize? So I think along those same lines, either people who have a new chance to live because they had a near-death experience, or the insights from people who are in their deathbeds, they lead us down to what common ways people regret their life. One is, I didn't live aligned with who I was. I lived a life that others expected of me. So in other words, I didn't live aligned with my values. Number 2 is, I worked too hard or I worked too much. And you can see how there's a lot of overlap in all of these. And number 3 is, I didn't express myself. I didn't have the courage to express myself. And that one could be interesting because my mentor, Ted Klontz, he's got a list of 6 fundamental human needs. And in his words, every single human behavior is a desperate attempt to meet one or more of these needs. And some of these are ones you'd expect: safety, belonging, connection, autonomy, stuff like that, significance. But there's one that doesn't have the same intuition or intuitive feel, which is self-expression. So he'll say that we've got a deep need to feel understood, to feel heard. Mm-hmm. And that's what regret number 3 is. I didn't express myself. I didn't let people know how I felt. And so just to round those up, regret 4, I lost touch with my friends. And regret 5, I didn't allow myself to be happy, or I fell for the contingent happiness trap. I'll be happy as soon as I retire, for example, or as soon as I empty nest, or whatever. So those, thinking about that and thinking about what I actually value, because I can't live in alignment with what's important to me if I don't really know what's important to me. That helps me understand what my priorities are. So that question, or the prompt, fill in the blank, money's purpose in my life is to, that can help distill all of your values, all your priorities, all your things that you find meaningful into a concise statement. I call that a financial purpose statement. It kind of becomes the lens through which you view your financial decisions. And then you can even apply it more broadly, not necessarily just financial decisions, but life decisions. So it's a way to remind ourselves when we get distracted. Say I'm feeling the tug of social comparison. This is a way to remind myself, that's actually not important to me. This is important to me. My family, not social media bites that I might get at or whatever. What you see as advisors, a person who saved and saved and saved, and now I don't like spending my money. Well, this statement can become permission to spend your money because this is what it's for. You can't take it with you. So what are you going to use this money for? Or for the person who overspends, it's a filter. I can take a default autopilot snap judgment decision that I'm going to regret later, and it puts a space between impulse and purchase. And is this thing something that I actually want, or am I bored, or am I stressed, or am I whatever? Having a filter, this purpose statement filtered, helps live more intentionally. And in my opinion,
I 100% agree. I think, throughout our careers and that we often try and find these kind of guiding lights or North Stars or these things, right? We kind of try and create missions and we get to them, and retirement years should be no different. We should have a value statement, a purpose statement, a financial statement, whatever we want to call it, to understand that, and I think it's even more important in retirement that money needs a purpose in retirement more than it's ever needed a purpose. When you're working and accumulating and money's coming in, although it's important to have a purpose, you're replacing money with things. So, psychologically, to hold yourself accountable to spending money and time on what's most important is not as challenging when you've got a constant flow of money coming in. It's more challenging when you're spending down to zero, right? That's a really challenging concept. And that's why these statements, I think, are so important. I want to touch on, because you and I draw and talk and write a lot about spending money and time, right? I think if we kind of put it in one great big topic, but and you've done some amazing sketches about this. One of them was about enjoy your experience. It may be the last time, right? It's kind of it's giving people that sense of reality again. It's kind of time is something that we all have and used worst. I think William Penn said something along those lines. Why is it important, in your opinion, as ever, when kind of planning and living in retirement, to actually put time in perspective? Time is more precious. Time is precious all the time, but time is more precious as we get older. Why is it important to really have a time plan and think about how you're going to spend your time and then align the money to that?
The term time plan, that's the first time I've heard that before.
I think it come off the cuff. So I'm sure we'd sketch about it and something will come up very similar at some point.
Good. And so this is the recognition that everything that you've ever done and everything that you will do will eventually be done for the last time. Hopefully we have finite lives, so eventually I'll pass away and everything will have been done for the last time. But it doesn't need to be that, focused on mortality, because the last time, saying you picked up your child and held your child before they were too big to do that. Or it could be even things that we feel frustrated by. When was the last time that you changed your child's diaper? Did you know that was the last time? We often don't. When was the last time that you walked your dog? When was the last time you went camping? Skiing? When was the last time that you had a date night? There will be a last time that we do those things. Sometimes it's because I lost interest and I don't go skiing anymore, or sometimes it's because the person that I would have done it with, or I can't walk my dog anymore because the dog passed away. Other people have their own lifelines, so I've got a finite life, and other people have a finite life that are not aligned at the same time. I'm going to predecease people. People are going to predecease me. There's going to be grieving involved. Like, from the experience perspective, if I plan to, say, spend time with my parents, they usually, things could happen, but usually my mom's going to pass away before I am. So it's not enough for me to say, I've got 45 years left or 40 years left. I've got 40 years to spend with my mom. That's not really true, is it? Because everybody's got their own lifelines. So when was the last time I had dinner with my mom? I'm going to use a different example because that's going to be way too mortality focused. But it could be like, when was the last time I walked my dog? My dog's getting older. This is still mortality focused, but it's not too. There's going to be a last time that I walked my dog. And then that recognition does a couple of things. One, it helps me realize that I'm doing it. So if I only have a finite number of times, I don't want to waste those times. So I'm going to be more present and not distracted, lost in thought. But it's also efficient to actually maybe do more. So I have to talk about doing the math, this experience math. So think about, how often do you see your parents? 5 times a year, 6 times a year? How many years would you predict your parents have left? 10 more years? Okay, well, that's pretty simple math. You've got, 6 and 10? You've got 60 more times to have dinner with the parents. So I have people picture poker chips. You've got 60 dinner with your parents chips. That's it. So now you've got all these, this is it. You got 60 chips left. So if I take this chip and I exchange it for the experience, well, we got 59 chips left. I'm exchanging this chip for this experience. Now, hopefully I'm more present now because I'm seeing this dwindling pile of experience chips. But the second part of that is, if it's based on something like, I'm just gonna hang around this weekend and watch the TV. But then I see this stack of dinner with my mom chips. And I said, well, maybe I should actually go turn in one of those chips. I don't want to leave these chips on the table. Viewing life through is going to be the last time. Reviewing life through experiences have a finite number of time. It helps us appreciate our time. I think it does. It helps us be more present there. It helps us be more intentional. Because I can change that math too. If 60 is not enough chips, I just say, maybe I should go see my mom more often and turn those 60 into 100 chips or something like that. Or my mom sees that. Maybe she can say, maybe I want more than 10 years. Maybe I should do a little lifestyle things and I can have 12, 14 years left or something. But so you can change the math and you can change the number of chips. But seeing, I think, it is as scary as it sounds to think existentially like this. think back to the near-death experience people. It's the people who are faced with mortality that are better at reprioritizing. So this is a interesting way to think about. I have a finite number of experiences. At some point, I will do this experience for the last time, and I want to appreciate it more. I want to be more present, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the most out of these.
Yeah. I think it's so crucial for everyone listening in just to kind of think on that a little bit. I mean, I've got a couple of things that I talk about when I talk about this is not about turning investments into income. This is about turning money into memories, right? That's kind of a really important distinction and thinking of it differently. And also one of my favorite sketches that I've done, I know you've done something on this, and the message I try and get out there is that it's not a disaster if you leave money on the table, but it's a disaster if you leave memories and experiences behind that you could have had. And so if you've got these chips and yet you're fearful of, and they could be, spending time with parents, those chips could be, I think I've got 5, long haul trips in me before I can't, or in us before we can't do it anymore. I've got a personal one at the moment. My daughter, my eldest, is coming up 16, and I think I've got 5 chips left to go on holiday as a family of kind of what it once was. When she gets to 2021, she's not, I don't think she'll come on a trip with mum and dad anymore. Now, my life will change and my holidays will change, but I value our time away as holiday. And I'm thinking, well, I better make the next 3 or 4 or 5 bloody brilliant, because there'll be the last time that we go away on holiday together as a family, right? So I think if we start picturing this and giving money purpose and going, like, if I don't spend it on these chips whilst I can, then I'm only leaving unspent chips behind. And that's not great, right? I think that's the thing that we all need to start to reframe. It's not, you don't need an income, you need memories. And money's, I think my version of kind of what is money for, or money is a tool, is to create memories and experiences. And I think it's really good that you've brought this up, because people need to be intentional about planning what those memories and experiences are, and also being open to kind of last minute, scary, risky type kind of things that kind of take you out your comfort zone, and you can take advantage of opportunities and untraveled paths and unknown roads. I think, and I will put the link to your blogs and sketches, because you've got some really hard-hitting ones and messages based on this kind of thing, which I think is so important for people to understand.
And it was great to have that real life example. And it's about, to look back into the values. It's recognizing which experience chips do I want to use. Using these ones to go to the whatever club that I want to belong to. There's opportunity cost too. So if I spend this chip to go to the country club, that's a chip that I can't go on a date night with. So which of these chips do I actually want to use? Which chips can I push aside and I don't need to use them, or I won't feel as bad leaving those on the table as I would leaving these on the table.
So such a great message, Derek. As we wrap up, I've got one final question and kind of thought that I'd really like to kind of pick your brain on. So I never thought I would ever call myself someone who is kind of necessarily a creator, but I'm definitely kind of putting myself in that space now. You're definitely a creator, and I think we've come full circle. You started this conversation off with the premise that you were a CFA in spreadsheets. You were thinking it's a math problem, etc. But actually, how important do you think it is to have a creative and a kind of a designer mindset when it comes to people planning their retirement, taking them out of the spreadsheet and getting them into kind of creative designer mode? I love trying to frame that with clients. This is kind of like, you need to now, paint the blank canvas and scribe your story. Stop focusing on pressing numbers on a calculator. How important do you think it is to kind of, find our creative side when it comes to planning retirement?
Question, and I just had this thought that's kind of ironic. I said I was the math guy, and I thought it was a math problem, and I literally just closed with, do the math on your experiences. It's still math, but it's a different kind of math. It's a different kind of math. So being able to design your life, but doing so in a way where you're resilient, because you know that this is true in the stock market. People who do investment management will often say some version of, I know there's going to be down markets. I don't know when. I don't know why. I don't know how long they're going to be. I don't know that. But what I know for sure is there will be a down market. When there is, not if, when there is, here's what we're going to do about it. Probably going to rebalance this out. When we design our life, it's important to think about when unexpected things happen, often out of our control, sometimes in our control, but when the unexpected things happen, not if, here's how we can kind of refocus. And that's what the purpose is, whether financial purpose or otherwise. Nietzsche has this quote, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. The how is like a life transition. It's the things that toss you around. And when you get disoriented by whatever life happened threw at you, if you could reorient to that beacon or that North Star, it's super helpful. So designing life is about intentions. What do I intentionally want to do? But detaching from outcomes, because that's outside of our control. And then that's again where a goal is maybe a particular outcome that I want. Doesn't mean I can't steer that way, but just recognize that so much is out of our control. And when things happen, we can always reorient. We can always change our mind. But having intention breaks us out of reactionary living, where I'm just floating around life reacting to whatever happens to me or whatever life throws at me, kind of like on autopilot. This helps us live more intentionally. All this, I didn't think I was going to talk about this. The business movie Click, I can't remember when it came out. It's like Adam Sandler movie where he finds this remote control. And this remote control helps him fast forward through the bad parts of his life. But so what happens is he fast forwards through his entire life. So he's on autopilot through his whole life, wakes up and says, dang it, I missed my entire life because I was on autopilot. I wasn't there for it. So being able to say, okay, I'm gonna do this with awareness, I'm gonna do this on purpose, I'm gonna do this intentionally. It can get us out of this spell that many of us are in, where we're just kind of floating around certain sets of circumstances.
Totally agree. And kind of, I think that comes to the point around, like, we need to step out of the kind of a binary outcome, right? If we get into an outcome focused world, outcomes are either good or bad. They're positive or negative. It's success or failure. And actually, it's more about the inputs. It's more about the intention that you go in. If the intention is right, there is no failure. You learn, and then you move forward and you go again, and you, as you said, reorientate and navigate elsewhere. I think too much retirement planning is often focused on success and failure. It's like, if you're not retired by 65, it's a failure. If you haven't got $1 million or pounds, it's a failure. If you haven't gone on massive holidays and done all this, it's a failure. We need to step out of that, figure out what's important to us, and then navigate ourselves through and just learn along the way, because we can still continue to learn and understand and progress in our retirement years. I think it's ever important to do so and take away those kind of binary outcomes, because as you said earlier on, you could really kind of send yourself in a spiral, right? If this is, I've had two things that I've really wanted to do, and this is, I'm focused on this outcome, and both of them have failed, it's kind of like, well, what's the point? So I think we need to be more open to kind of the journey, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And so I often speak in terms of systems versus goals. So goal being a particular outcome. Personal one that might help people think through journey versus goal is, I used to have so I'd read a lot. I carve out time to read every day. And so I used to have a goal of, I want to read 60 books every year. It's a very measurable thing. It's a SMART goal. It's specific and all that stuff.
I read a lot, and that's made me sweat. I'm not sure whether I could get anywhere near that. That's a very good amount of books.
So that's the problem. Is I had this thing in mind. I need to get to the 60, and so I would get to a book like Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, or Meanings of Life by Bob Moster, or anything by Steven Pinker, and I'd look at it and say, it's going to take too much time, and I'm not going to get to the 60. Because I'm focused on the number of books, not the quality of the book. So the goal is having a specific outcome, a system is, okay, well, I'm just going to carve out an hour a day to read. I don't care how many books I end up with reading at the end of the day, but I'm going to read for an hour every day. That becomes a system. And some of this is definitional because some might argue, well, your goal is to read for an hour, fair enough. But that's in service of something bigger, whereas a goal is like, okay, I'm done. I did the 60, or I didn't. Now I feel bad about myself for whatever reason. Gunning for your boss's job, that's a goal. Wanting to retire at 65, that's a goal. Doing something that makes you more marketable, that's a system. Doing something, finding things to spend your time on and having ways to give back, say, versus retiring, that can be a system. So that might be helpful. Maybe it's more confusing. But
No, it's not. I think it's amazing because actually, but just one comment, I think it's brilliant. And I'm actually thinking about my own kind of life, and there's a couple of things that I could absolutely use that on. But one of the things I think is really interesting that I would comment on there is that, let's use the book example, right? It's 60 books, and let's say you start in January, you're at July, and you're on 10. Like, you're going to give up, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, actually, you're going to. And then you're going to feel like a failure well before anywhere getting near the goal. And I think that's part of the problem. It's like you set these things, and actually, if you're behind on this particular goal, I want to retire at 65 with £1 million, and you're 64 with £500,000. You're going to go, oh my God, I've got to work for another 10 years. This is just rubbish, right? It's kind of you can't. We're just setting ourselves up for kind of failure, really, when it comes to these kind of things. So, Derek, this has been such a cool conversation. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your knowledge. It's added so much value to me, and I know the listeners are gonna take away. Where can people get hold of you? I'm going to put all of your links to notes and websites, etc. But tell me about where they can connect up.
Easiest place is to think about meeting and go over to meeting.blog. That's where I do a lot of my teaching and drawing, and that's the stuff that gets distributed to social media. So the easiest way to stay in touch with what I'm doing is signing up for the newsletter over at meeting.blog.
I'll put all those links on the show notes. Derek, thanks so much for joining us today on the Humans vs. Time podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
And that just leads me to thank everyone for joining me once again on the Humans vs. Retirement podcast. Until next time, take care.